when it comes to guns, they did some research in Alaska. They looked at literally hundreds of cases, and certainly there were lots of cases where people shot and killed the bear, but there was also a lot of cases where people died. They were severely mauled and killed on site. And a lot of cases where people missed the bear, never got the gun out in time, shot themselves in the leg, shot this person they were with. And that's why I always say to people, like, it's so important to think about, like, what is my best tool in this situation? And I think your best tool is always going to be bear spray.
Hey folks, what's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. My name is Matthew Christoph, and on this podcast, we talk about the environment and the science of sustainability. Today, we're talking bears. I know a lot of you work in the environmental industry, or you're a biologist or a forester or whatever. You guys work in the bush, and you're like, okay, great, I've heard about bears. I've done the bear safety course. I know what I should do. I've heard this a million times. I'm good. I don't need to listen to this. You're wrong. You do need to listen to this. I thought the same thing. I've been through these courses so many times, and you never know what you're going to get. You get different opinions and different information, and it's not always clear. And you just kind of get this general idea of just don't run into bears. And I happened to take a course through this company called Bear Safety, and their founder, Kim Titchener, is an incredible speaker, so incredibly knowledgeable, and I had to have her on to tell her story, and because it was just so clear and concise and obvious when she lays it all out, and I've never heard anybody explain it so matter-of-factly and so scientifically. It backs up all her information with science, and so I wanted to bring her on to talk about bear safety. How do we think about it? How do we react? What are the ways that we respond? And it's perfect. I really hope you listen to this. I hope you like it. Kim was awesome. Really, really experienced person. She knows so much. She's not just talking about, stuff she's read in a book. She's talking about stuff she's experienced, stuff that she's actually learned herself and read through research. And she's talking about her life, right? She's made this her life for the last 18 years. She's been working with bears and bear safety and outdoor education and all this kind of stuff. And it was awesome. She's so much fun to have on. We had a great time talking. I couldn't have asked for a better guest. Thank you, Kim, for taking the time, and I hope you all like it. Sponsors for this episode, West Fraser is the number one for 2022. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do this the way I want to, so thank you, West Fraser, for all your support. Greenlink Forestry is also a sponsor. Been with me since the beginning. Can't do this without Greenlink. Thank you, Greenlink. Damage Timber is another sponsor. Go to damagetimber.com and put Your Forest 10 in at checkout when you buy something, and you get 10% off. And if you want to figure out what Damage Timber is, just go to that website. They put Damage Timber in your house. You'll find out. And finally, our final sponsor, or partner, I should say, is Forest Proud. Forest Proud is an education organization aiming to keep forests as forests. They support forests as climate solutions, and I couldn't be more happy to have them on. They've helped me out a lot, so thank you, Forest Proud. Now, without any further messing around, let's dive into this conversation, talking bears, bear safety, all kinds of cool stuff with the awesome, the very experienced, and very fun Kim Titchener. Here we go. To start everything off, I think, just in case people only make it like 5 minutes in, if they need the crash course on bear awareness, bear safety, what's the do you have a one-liner or a 2-sentence thing that you tell people to be like, do this? If you know nothing, do this.
Yeah,
what
absolutely. Make tons of noise and carry a can of bear spray. So if it all goes down the hole and you're like, oh my gosh, you just spray the bear.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Simple. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's all you need to know. Goodbye, everybody. That's it. We're done. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all then, or I guess not first of all, secondly, let's get to know you a little bit. And like, why did you get into bears? How did you get into bears and this job particularly? Like how long have you been doing it? What have you been doing? Yeah. It seems like it's become a bit of it's like a very, very passionate project of yours for sure.
I did not expect to get into bears.
Sure.
I grew up with my father being a science teacher and biologist and just always having a love and wonder for nature. And it was great to have this person who could just answer every question I had. And then as I got older, I got into the outdoors with my family and hiking and camping and canoeing and fishing. And then when I went, I decided to move to Banff National Park when I was in my late teens, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was like, I'm going to go work as a housekeeper at the Banff Springs Hotel.
Let's go see where it's beautiful.
Woo,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, and then I was just like blown away. I was like, wait, people live with like large carnivores in this little town? Like I was from like just outside of Toronto and I wasn't expecting it, right? And there's like elk on people's lawns. There's grizzly bears eating elk calves in the yard. Like it's nuts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but they're doing it. Like it's happening. This is working. And I mean, I was of course naive. I'm a teenager. I'm just like, it's coexistence, right? Yeah.
Balance. We've achieved it. Yeah.
And then when I finally decided to go to university, I was reading. I was in like some environmental ethics course in my first year, and I was reading like John Muir, Aldo Leopold, and I fell in love with the concept of conservation. And I'm like, I am going to do this. I'm going to be involved somehow. And so I started writing letters. And one of the letters I wrote for summer jobs was to the Friends of Banff National Park and Parks Canada in Banff National Park. I was like, I want to work in the park. And they loved my letter and they called me and they said, you're hired. I'm like, cool. What am I doing? Like no interview. Yeah. And well, they're like, you're going to be a wildlife interpreter. I was like, awesome. So I'm like, this is so amazing. I'm taking ecology classes. This is like, I'm learning all about nature right now in school. So this is going to be really cool. And I get there and they like, here's your truck. Here's your bear spray and your radio, and you're going to drive around the park for 10 hours a day and you're going to monitor bear activity. And I'm like, cool. And they're like, oh, and you're going to talk to people about bears and wildlife. And I was like, this is awesome. And then within a few days of the job, I realized that I was actually a bear babysitter. they lied to me. And so I'm literally rushing from one situation to the next where it's like, hey, there's a grizzly bear in the campground at Tunnel Mountain, downtown Banff, and is eating an elk calf next to a family that's trying to have lunch. I'm like, what? Yeah. And I'm like, okay. They're like, can you drive over and just go stand on the road and we're gonna rush this bear out of the campsite. You're gonna hear bangers and flares and we're gonna scare it out of the campground to get it off of the elk calf. I'm like, what? They're like, don't let the bear get hit by a car. I'm like, okay.
How do I stop that? Yeah.
Like, what do they mean?
Yeah.
And like, there's cars coming down the road and all I hear is like, bang, bang, pop, pop, and like yelling, screaming. And all of a sudden I see this like fur ball of congealing fat just coming straight at me. Yeah. And this is my first time seeing a grizzly bear. I hadn't seen a grizzly bear before this. I'd seen black bears growing up, but I'd not actually seen one like in the park yet. Sure. And it's literally coming straight at my face. Yeah. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So I jump out of my truck and I stop the traffic and I watch as she runs right past the front end of my truck and she's gone. And that was my first experience. And that was it. I was in love. And I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah. Like I get to be like on the ground trying to help bears survive on the landscape. And I had to basically go day after day, not only tracking bears, but also, getting to see them, getting to spend time with them, seeing how their lives were being in close proximity to humans. And we had tons of bear jams where people would stop on the side of the road. And I started to realize, people aren't coexisting with bears. They actually have no idea what they're doing.
Anytime I drive to Jasper or Banff, you stop and you see those people standing 15 feet away from a grizzly bear taking photos outside of their vehicle. And you're like, where are you from? Like, what are you doing? Have you never heard of an 800-pound, ball of meat with claws? Like, it's just like,
It's crazy. And it really is like that. It's like that every single day in that park, and parks across the nation and in the US too. And it's amazing not more people get killed by bears, to be completely honest. It totally shocks me at the grace at which these animals let us continue to live with them.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. They're smart enough to figure it out, I guess. Like, to some degree, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I kept going to school. I kept working my summers in the park, having lots of experience with bears, sometimes good, sometimes bad. I have definitely been bluff charged a few times.
Right.
That was an accident. I unfortunately did see some of the bears that I worked with. They didn't survive. In fact, most of the bears that I worked with that lived in close proximity to the town sites of Banff and Lake Louise, they were either hit by cars, hit by trains, or shot for getting into trouble with people. So my wonderful view of this all being fantastic and coexisting in a national park was literally thrown down this hole of jaded death. Right. I was like, so it was really hard. And like some of those bears I lost like cubs and one bear I had to put into a zoo, and it was awful. Yeah. But at the same time, I was young and I still had lots of hope. And so I was like, no, I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to dedicate myself to this. Yeah. And then after I graduated university, I got a job in the environmental field. And I eventually, I think what happened was I for a little bit there, I didn't work with bears. I worked more in environmental management and education. And then I got a call one day that a woman had been killed by a grizzly bear in Canmore, which is just south of Banff National Park. And she had climbed a tree and her two friends had backed away. And so her choice to climb that tree was possibly even based off of some old bear safety information that she had heard. Like back in the day, they used to say things like that, like climb a tree for a grizzly. And it's unfortunate, but it's not true. They can climb trees. Right. And so the bear climbed the tree, pulled her from the tree, and she died from the fall. And then the call that I got was to say, hey, we're putting together a coalition of government agencies to try to kind of talk about how we can manage wildlife better, we can manage people better. And they asked if I would help join them and figure it out. And so we spent months having lots and lots of meetings. It's incredibly difficult to work with federal, provincial, and municipal level agencies and have them all
you don't say
and be like, in your mid-20s trying to tell these people to work together and find common goals. And I had no idea what I was doing, right? I just had the passion of conservation. And so, I ended up just having it fall in my lap. They're like, write yourself a job description and find some money. I'm like, okay. And then,
yes, I will.
Yeah. So 10 years later, I had a full-time charitable organization called WildSmart, and, it was running year round with staff, 50 volunteers, and doing amazing work, working with communities on reducing wildlife attractants, getting bylaws in so that people, obviously didn't have bird feeders and composters, bear resistant bins, tons of really great education programs for the public and recreationists. And then I decided to leave. Yeah. Because I was ready to move on. Sure. And I got a couple calls from the oil industry asking if I would start a consulting business. And so I did, in 2012. And then in 2014, I literally just ripped the Band-Aid and decided to leave, a full-time paycheck to nothingness. And so it took me about 9 months to build my business. And, Suncor Energy was one of my first contracts, and they had a woman killed by a black bear at work in a laydown yard, and they said, "Can you create a course?" And so I said, let's make it multi-species. Let's not just focus on bears. Let's teach people how to use bear spray, and let's give them the skill set that they need to be able to get out there and work and not cause problems with bears and not get hurt and not get in trouble with other wildlife. And so I did that, and then it just kind of cascaded after that. The company is called Bear Safety and More, and we work with industries across Canada and the United States. I work with communities. I work on grizzly bear, black bear conflict, as well as polar bears, which I just started doing recently.
Nice. Yeah, it was like I took your course there a few weeks ago, right? The 3-hour one in the morning, and yeah, like you never know. Like I've done enough of the bear safety stuff, like here and there, that you're like you don't know what you're gonna get, right? And no, doing yours was like, it was the most concise, like clear and like well-rounded, like with evidence and everything else, that like it was just a very clear like storyline of like, do this, don't do this, this is why. Shut up. And it was like, perfect. This is good. I really liked it, right? Good. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like I that's why I wanted to have you on. I did have a thought about this, like this space of bear safety, right? Like I know all throughout my career and like even as a wildland firefighter, you learn about that stuff, right? And that was a whole shit show with the opinions that were in there about what to do with bears. At one point, someone stood up and they were like, well, I worked in the oil patch and I had a crew of people, and one guy worked with bears all the time, and he said that you can tell it's a bluff charge if they're baring their teeth or not. And I'm like, you're going to stand there when a grizzly bear is running towards you. You're going to go down on your knees and go, oh, it's baring its teeth. It's fine. Like, it's okay. It's like, no, you're not going to do that. And even if that was true, right? But it was interesting. So anyways, that brought me to this place of, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of ego, I find, with people that just tend to think they're like, well, I'm a cowboy and I can handle it. Don't worry about it, or whatever. Like, it's just stuff like that, right? I wanted to know how much resistance you run into in this. Like, I'm sure you do. Like, how much resistance do you run into, and like, what's the most like common issue that like people won't learn this stuff? You know?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing folks want to tell me everything they know about bears when they meet me.
Right.
And then I have
Doesn't help that you're a woman, probably, right?
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
It's actually quite an amazing experience for me because of all of the industries that I work with. And, you know, I jump on a plane and I end up in the middle of Alaska, in the middle of nowhere. And I've got to talk to a bunch of guys that are working on a railway line.
Right.
And they don't expect to have a woman show up.
Right.
And they're shocked by it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then once I have a chance to really sit down and talk to them and explain to them that my work is science-based, it's not just something I found on Google.
Hey guys, I know what I'm talking about.
Actually,
all right?
Yeah. I have been bluff charged by a bear. I have had a bear try to eat me. I've actually had these physical experiences with these animals. This is not just made up stuff off the top of my head. Right. So I'm coming from a place of experience. And once they see that, I think they see how passionate I am about this stuff. Mm-hmm. They go, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. They're like, oh, I guess I was wrong. And I'm like,
listen to this person.
Yeah. I'm like, think about where you learned that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. There's tons of myths out there, and they continue to percolate. And I mean, everyone has an opinion and a myth, and it's really important that we dispel them. And I feel like I've spent the past 18 years just trying to get the right information out there. Yeah. And the information does change over time because we learn new things about bears.
Totally.
All the time, and other species, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we only recently found out that cougars happen to be social, and we didn't know that. We didn't know that because we didn't have wildlife cameras, so we couldn't observe them, and we didn't have GPS collars where we could see their movement patterns and see they were running into each other and having little parties. So, you know, I always want to be open to new learning, new opportunities to have a different perspective on an animal. Yeah. And that's what I try to get people to understand when they come to our classes, is that you're going to come back to a course in 3 years from now, and you're going to learn a bunch of new stuff too. It's not going to be the same thing every single time, because
keep updating,
we are learning new things, because unfortunately the number of attacks by large carnivores is not going down. It's going up, and it's going up significantly quicker than anybody would want it to be. And it's because the human population is increasing so quickly, and we're spending more and more time in the outdoors. We're working in these environments. And so it's inevitable we're going to have more data sets to work off of to figure out what's working and what's not. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was the part that really and it got me to believe that, okay, this person knows what they're talking about, right? Because I do feel like the 5 previous bear safety courses I did, it was like some dude being like, yeah, I don't know, just don't run and you'll be okay. And it's like, what? So I think as soon as you, again, you're your passion, your enthusiasm, and then learning your history and the science based, clearly no nonsense, this, it was perfect, right? How you broke down, and we'll get to this near the end, bear spray versus guns and that kind of stuff. You're like, here's the stats, here's the information, here's what we know, factual, not anecdotal, period. Right. And this is what it is. And yeah, I found that to be incredibly helpful, and just it was so good. So,
I'm so glad.
So you talked about dispelling some of the misconceptions in that. We don't need to spend too much time, because I do want to get to, what you should do, but maybe we should maybe dispel a few of those myths that you find the most damaging or the most widely held.
My pet peeves. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of them is people thinking that they can outrun a bear or that they should climb a tree.
Run downhill.
You're running downhill. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. That's a great thing about YouTube now. It's filled with tons of videos of like bears chasing bears, and you see how fast they move and even downhill. And you're just like, yep, there's no way I'm going to get more than 2 feet and then they're going to be on top of me.
Quadrupedal versus bipedal. You're never going to win.
No. Climbing trees is a big one that still continues to be a myth that I see a lot of, where people think they can climb a tree. And I always say, if you act like prey with a carnivore, you'll get treated like prey. You create that instinct to chase in the animal. We continue to see people turn and run when they run into a carnivore. It's just that fear, right?
Yeah.
And they don't know any better, and they do the wrong thing. Another big one is a lack of confidence that people have in bear spray. It's always, every time there's a bear attack in the news, immediately I just look at the comments and all it says is, well, I just have my 45 and I just have my shotgun and I'd be fine. And I'm like, no, none of you would be fine. You're telling me that at 80 yards away, a bear running at you at like 40, 50 kilometers an hour, that's going to be on you in under 2 seconds, that you're somehow going to get the safety off and get a perfect kill shot?
Yeah.
Who are you kidding?
Yeah.
Who are you kidding? Have you thought this through?
Yeah. No.
Let me tell you, hundreds of people have tried this over the last 100 years, and most of them didn't end well. Yeah. Right?
Didn't go well.
They like shot themselves. They shot their best friend. They didn't get their gun out at all. They got killed. I mean, look at Leonardo DiCaprio. That didn't work out well for him. Right?
The Revenant. Yeah. Good times. Yeah.
And then I think the last one that really, really bothers me, and it's understandable. It's just a lack of information available to the public, is this idea that, the way that you behave is species based, that grizzly bears are always going to be defensive and that black bears are always going to be predatory. And it's just not true.
Yeah. You totally dispelled some of the myths, like some of those ones that you talked about. There were some, like the bear spray one. I was like, I don't know how good it is. And then the species thing, I still held some of those misconceptions until you're just like, no. And then it was, I definitely learned for sure. And the species based thing especially was a weird one, because it's,
it's a toughie. And the thing is that it's still really out there. And, like if you look at a lot of the government websites in Canada and the US, you will still see that, information. Now, Parks Canada over 20 years ago changed theirs to a behavioral based approach. They're they're a very science based entity, and they do a great job at what they do. So they really follow through with, is it a defensive bear? Is it a non-defensive bear versus species only?
Right.
And I think that's been wonderful to see, but a lot of state government agencies, and in Canada are still very, very far behind on updating that information.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah.
Well, because even like for the average hiker, right? If they stumble upon a bear and it's, 20 feet away or whatever, they're probably not going to know if it's a black bear or a grizzly bear. Like they're not going to have, even if you're not an average hiker, even if you're someone who knows, if you just see a bear and it's right there, like you're not thinking straight. You're in fight or flight mode. Like I can't imagine that you're like, wait, okay, what do I do if it's a grizzly versus a black bear? Like it's not, it's problematic from the get-go.
Totally. It is. Yeah. And honestly, like it's kind of a fun game that a bunch of conflict specialists and I like to play on each other. We send each other photos, like horrible photos of bears where it's so hard to tell if it's a grizzly or a black bear. Right. And then we have to go through okay, what do you think it is? And then they have the original photo where they know there's a hump or they know there's claws and you can't tell. And you're like, oh, it's the worst picture ever.
Yeah, I hate you.
So how can I expect the public to figure that out?
Yeah. It's tough. Yeah. No, absolutely. And then, the other thing I wanted to do before we got into it was the media stuff. Like specifically, like I have a toddler now. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and like everything we watch is like animals talking, animals as humans kind of thing, right? That whole thing. And I have mixed feelings about it, but I wanted to know your opinion as like, what kind of a role do you think that media plays in people's misconceptions and like their feelings towards animals?
Oh, that's such a good one. I actually I'm writing an article right now on this topic.
Nice. Timely. I nailed
very
it.
Timely. So I've got an article that's going to be in the annual magazine for Polar Bears International this fall. And recently, in the last few months, there's been a few articles specifically about polar bears, but you could easily have the exact same language in with any other species of bear or other carnivores.
Sure.
And and they literally titled it Rogue Bear. And this polar bear had come into a community and broke into every house in the little village.
Was it Churchill?
It wasn't Churchill, actually. It was a different one. It was somewhere in Labrador.
Okay.
Thank goodness it wasn't Churchill. There's too many homes there to break into.
Right.
And they have an amazing polar bear alert program there. So they would have officers there in like literally a couple minutes and they would be helping out. But most communities in Canada who live with polar bears don't have that option.
Sure.
And so this polar bear just went to town, right? And so instead of the media person, the person who wrote this article, really getting into why the polar bear was there and why it was doing those behaviors, it just titled it. The editor, named it Rogue Bear. And I see many articles all the time where it's like, like the carnivore is rampaging, stalking, a rogue animal, and it doesn't really address the real causes of why the species is doing what they're doing. And quite honest, to be quite honest, majority of the time, it's the reason why this animal is in trouble with people is because of people.
Yeah.
It's not like a polar bear just decides one day, I'm just going to go trash a bunch of houses.
Right.
It's because they were doing something like getting into garbage and they started to learn to associate homes and people with food, and then they started breaking into their houses. That's because we didn't manage the wildlife attractants. It's our fault.
Right.
And yet we blame the animal. And then the repercussions of the media writing an article like that is all of the statements that were in that article were things like, we got to get more guns, we got to get more tags, we got to shoot more polar bears.
We got a bear problem. Yeah.
We have a bear problem. And you can say the same thing for an article on if there was an attack with a black bear or a grizzly bear, or if they damaged property. It always comes down to people saying there's too many of the animals, there's too much problems with them, and we've got to shoot them, we've got to get rid of them. And I'm like, but your problem's not going to go away. You'll continue to have the exact same problem. So I believe the media has a duty to get it right. I mean, that's what they study in journalism school, right? They've got to have multiple opinions when they write an article.
Objective,
Be objective.
Oh, yeah.
Not subjective. And, but editors want to get bait. Like, it's just clickbait to them.
Yeah.
And they don't care about the impacts they have, right? And so that basically what it does is it makes people feel powerless. They don't find out why these things are happening, and they're just terrified.
There's a monster out there, and what are we going to do? Yeah.
We're all going to die. There's no solution.
Yeah, for sure.
And so of course I called up the journalists and I explained to them the power that they held by helping to change that narrative. They have the ability to change the narrative, and it's all truthful information. If people actually knew that wildlife attractants were a big piece to why a lot of the conflicts occurred, they would be able to go to their government agency, whether it's municipal or provincial or federal or territorial, and say, hey, we don't want this. And they would be empowered and they would be educated to be able to change that narrative.
Right.
But because a lot of the media is not going to that because they're too busy trying to get as many clicks, that information doesn't change, and nothing changes for bears and nothing changes for people.
Yeah.
And now I say that, but I have been working with the media for 18 years and I have seen I've built some incredible relationships with national coverage media, magazines, radio stations, television stations, and they always call me. Every time there is a bear attack or a damage to property, I get my voice in there and I get the right information in there. And I get them in contact with the people who will actually tell them, if we could change this in our community, this is what we needed to do.
Makes sense. Like they just didn't have the contact. It's not like they were like actively being like, let's destroy the perception of bears. It was like they didn't know. They were just
they just don't know.
Ignorant of the issue. Yeah, for
absolutely. So I don't think they realize the power that they wield, and how much they could help in wildlife conservation if they were to do that. And when I speak at conferences, I really try to speak to communities and government agencies about the importance of building good relationships with the media, because it could really change things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, on another note, I think like you could, it's easy to blame the media for stuff, but I agree though. Like you look at something, this is off topic, but it kind of gets to the point, right? You look at COVID-19, right, as an issue, and you're like, the people that are like struggling to understand the science behind like vaccines or masking or that kind of stuff, it's not their fault. They're being sold and told a story that something bad is happening and they need to protect themselves against whatever the evils of vaccines or whatever. And it's the media portraying that, giving that out, right? And so like you said, they have a responsibility to Like, get the facts right, and like just state the facts, and like keep your opinion out of it if you can. Or if it is, just say opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Misinformation is not going well, and science is, as we know, is I'm just like, this is science. How come you don't believe me? Like, it's mind-boggling, but that's the culture that we're living in today.
Yeah, it's interesting, and media plays a big role for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and it's not something I thought we'd get to, but I'm glad we did. That's good. Okay, so I guess we should start to talk about I wanted to bring up stats on bear attacks, but like you mentioned that they're going up, and that's because people are there, and so we know what's getting worse. There's more people in the nature. What the hell? In the nature. They're in the nature. In the out of doors. Yeah. Have you picked up on that in nature writing? Some people like out of doors. Like they try to like, I'm going to change it. I'm an out of doors person. Like, you fuck off. It's not, it's outdoors. Quit. I find that funny. Anyways, that was a sidetrack. So I guess we can just we can jump right into like, what should people do?
Sure.
Right. So you were talking a lot about the behavioral approach versus the species approach.
Yeah.
So let's explain that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also it would be really good just to talk about how to not get yourself into a situation where you have to figure those pieces out, right?
Okay. Yep.
Would be okay if I start with how to avoid
wherever you want to go. This is you. I'm just trying to navigate it in some way. Like I feel like you know how to tell this story, so you go for it.
I think with humans, our brains naturally, when you start talking about things that are life and death, we get to that reptilian zone really quickly, and we kind of like it's very hard to get people to absorb information at that point, right?
Yeah.
And so I always like to really start my talks with of course things like, how to avoid an encounter in the first place. Like, let's empower you to do the right thing so you don't have to deal with this, right?
Sure,
like,
I'll start with that. That's like that. That's good.
Like you've been hiking and working in these environments for all these years in our careers and out for fun with our friends and family, and we're still alive. There's a reason why.
Right.
There's a reason why.
Sure.
One, because most of the time bears and other carnivores really just don't view us as food, right? They're just like, yep, that's a person. I'm out of here.
Yeah. That's risky. Yeah.
Like they're risk averse. Like generally speaking, like these animals want nothing to do with us. And so I always try to remind people that the best tool that we have as human beings, and it's free, is our voice.
Right.
It's awesome. And you can sing, you can yodel, you can just let out little hoops and hollers every couple minutes as you go. And what you're doing is just letting nature know that you're there.
Yeah.
You're letting them know that you're coming in their direction and that you are a human. You are not a two-legged deer that they should munch on. Right? Like, what are we thinking? We go into these environments with these animals and you're walking with your head down, you're blasting some Cardi B, and these animals are supposed to know like what you are. Like, I don't know. Let's get real about how are we going to avoid getting into the conflicts in the first place.
Don't look like prey. Don't act like prey.
Don't look and act like
with
prey.
That.
Yeah. As I'm like, I've got to go to a tree planting camp next week, and I'm like, I have to teach you guys not to look like two-legged deers.
Yeah. Well, they're bending over a lot. They might even look like four-legged deer.
They would look like four-legged deers for sure. I get concerned about them, right? Because I'm like, these guys are bent over working. Anyways, it's so depending on obviously what you're doing, you're working, you're hiking, you've got to really think about the environment that you're in. Like, are you walking down a trail? We know that bears use the same trails that we use. They're paths of least resistance. So you're going to be in their space. Anywhere where that forest canopy is going to be opened up, you're going to have really good food sources for these animals. So we're sharing space with them, whether we're recreating or we're working in those environments. And so as you're moving through those areas, just keep making noise every couple of minutes. Take into consideration things like wind, water, like really poor lines of sight can make it really tough for bears to even know that you're there. So just, again, be really observant of those things.
Yeah.
Watch for things like track, scat, overturned rocks, logs. If you smell a dead animal or you find a carcass, immediately grab your bear spray, pull it out, quietly start to back away and be prepared for a bear running at you at any moment. That's like one of the worst case scenarios you can get into. And so it's something you really want to be always aware of your surroundings and like, am I seeing like tracks going in the exact same direction I'm going? Big giant piles of bear poo. Maybe I shouldn't walk this way.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Carrying bear spray physically on your body so that if you do get into an encounter, at least you can grab it really quickly. And then one of the other ones, which I love, is that for those that recreate, is when we look at the statistics, most of the time attacks happen to people that are by themselves or with one other person. And that's not just with bears, that's with other carnivores too, like cougars. And so if you go out in a group of 4 or more people, you've got a much better chance of, 1, not running into a bear because you're so loud, 2, a bear that may be looking for a potential food source goes, oh, that's a giant group of people. There's no way I'm going to be able to eat them. I'm going to keep moving. It's over. Or you do accidentally surprise a bear at close range. They're going to be really intimidated by that large group. Whereas if you're by yourself with one other person, you might end up in a situation where you have a bear charge you or make contact. So those are the big, like, how to avoid things. And I think if we could all do a better job of just doing that, we would start to see the numbers of attacks go down. Another piece of this is just the risk enhancing behaviors that we're seeing. And unfortunately, when we look at the stats and we look at the number of attacks that have happened by large carnivores, since 1955, about 50% of them have been human caused from people doing what we call risk enhancing behaviors. So, certainly leaving children unsupervised alone outdoors in carnivore habitat, a really bad idea. Children get attacked by carnivores, quite a bit more. And, carnivores like cougars, black bears, and coyotes tend to go after kids. Walking your dog off leash. All right. I know there's going to be people that listen to this and are like, no, Kim, I love walking my dog off leash. I get it. Do you have a dog?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, I know. And it's just so nice to go to the park.
I live right next to the huge off-leash dog park.
Yeah.
But I am always aware of the coyotes because they are rampant through there. So
totally.
I got his recall like that. So he's, but still, he's a small dog. So it's still, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was not that lucky to get that dog. I got a $75 Slave Lake rescue. Ah, perfect. Excellent.
And she chases it and would eat anything she found because she's basically wild.
Yeah.
So I have to leash her. But what we're finding in the stats is that a lot of the cases that where people are getting attacked by black bears and grizzly bears, adults, a lot of those cases involve people walking dogs off leash and then getting into a defensive encounter with a grizzly or a black bear with cubs or on a food source. So walking your dog on a leash can really help to avoid those incidents too. If you hunt, be aware that you can have a grizzly bear come in and steal your kill before you get to it. So go in a group, scope in the area before you go in because it's a very dangerous situation if you come upon a bear. And then, avoiding being in the outdoors dusk and dawn is another one. And of course, don't approach a bear. Please just don't think you're going to get a selfie. That is the whole approaching a carnivore with young is like not a good idea.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah. Even in the parks.
Yeah. There was this guy named Kyle a couple years ago. I think it was last year, the year before, and he saw some bobcat kittens. He thought they were bobcat kittens, and he was trail running in Utah. And he's like, "Oh, they're so cute!" And he comes running up to them with his phone, trying to video it. And all of a sudden, this cougar comes out of the bushes and full on bluff charges him.
Jesus.
Yeah. And he ends up backing up, and he spends 6 minutes with this cougar charging.
Goodness.
Thank goodness didn't make contact. And he learned a good lesson that day.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a good point in the course about like how it's funny how every time someone has a bear encounter, they have their phone out and they can put it on YouTube.
Yep. And they do.
Thank God they did for the bear course because it brought it made some like good visuals, but at the same time, if your life's in danger, don't try to film it.
Yes. Yeah. And that's another pet peeve I have is that I continue to see that being one of the first things that people do when they see a bear. It's not pull out a can of bear spray. It's like, oh, got to get my phone to video setting. Yeah. And like, did we forget that phones are like used to dial 911? Like, because nobody calls 911.
No, it's definitely not that. Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All those. It's a little bit ridiculous when you think about, how obsessed we are with our phones and just like using them to capture every single moment of the day, right? Like we can't, it's especially, oh my God, a huge grizzly bear. It's a teddy bear. Yeah,
absolutely. It's wild. Yeah. There's such a lack of connection. Like where was I? I was driving down Calgary Trail in Edmonton the other day, and there was a bit of a traffic jam ahead of me. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And this Canada goose with her little chicks were trying to cross the street.
Oh, yeah.
And this woman was literally following behind them, trying to video them and actually pushing them out onto the road.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So instead of trying to help them cross the road, she was too busy getting her video in. And I was like, this is exactly a great example of it. It's the lack of connection between the impact we have on wildlife when we do this. We video them, when we photograph them, and then our own safety. Like she didn't even consider the fact she get hit by a car. Yeah. And that's what we see all the time.
And getting attacked by a goose would not be a good time.
That's not fun either. No.
They are pretty vicious when they want to. Don't they? I think they have claws. They have like dew claws or something, don't they?
Yeah, I don't mess with birds.
Yeah, don't mess with birds. They're dinosaurs. Leave them alone.
Exactly.
Yeah, that stuff is not a good time. Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So one other thing that came up to my mind when you were talking about like stay away from the situation, like try not to get into the situation to begin with. Like even stuff like berry patches or like just like food. You said food sources, right? But like I know like a lot of people would be walking, oh, nice raspberries or blueberries, and you'll start like, and it's like, that's great, do that. Definitely forage. Definitely, I totally get the connection to nature, and like I do it too. But like when you're doing that, be aware. Yeah. But the bear might also be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely go crazy on picking raspberries.
Of course, That
you can't not, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
situational awareness, right?
Yeah. Like I bring a friend, we both have our cans of bear spray. One of us takes turns kind of standing up, looking around. Like we're careful. Yeah. Like, cause we know that we're literally in a buffet and if, a bear might want to come to join that buffet. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. No, yeah. Be aware of those, like, if you like it, so does the bear.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you take our course, we actually go through like what the seasonal changes are and things that these animals are feeding on. So you're thinking about it when you head out into the trail. Like even right now, like as we head into like, we're in the spring, it's going to start to get really hot. The snow is going to melt in the mountains. We had a really high snowpack this year. So it's going to rush. And when the water starts to rush, it's going to be really tough for people who are out hiking. They're doing crossing back and forth across creeks and rivers. It's going to be loud. So I always say to people, if you have a choice, if this isn't for work and you've got a choice to like not go into spaces where the ability for an animal to hear you, like avoid those areas, right? Like go hike up high, go up higher into the mountains if you can, or go out into more open habitats where your lines of sight are better, right?
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. Yeah. Just avoid the situations where you're going to startle a bear.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. No, it makes sense. Like you said before, right? They'll avoid you if you give them the opportunity.
Yes.
Most likely.
Yes. Most of the time they do. I mean, every day they do.
Right. Yeah.
And which is amazing when you think of the millions of people that go out into bear country every year in our parks and protected areas and just residential areas and neighborhoods. And so very few people actually get physically mauled by a bear. So they're obviously very avoidant.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So getting into the, what'd you call it?
Behavioral-based approach.
Let's do this. Okay. So how do we,
figure this out. Okay. So back in the day, it would have been, if it's a grizzly, do this. If it's a black bear, do that. Now, what they've figured out over time is that it is better to have more of a behavioral-based approach instead of a species-based, where instead of going, oh, it's a grizzly, I should do this, actually think about the situation that you're in.
Right.
So if you're walking down a trail and you're like, oh, shoot, there's a little cub in front of me, or there's a bear feeding on an elk carcass, or I've come around a corner and I've surprised a bear at close range, we call that a defensive encounter. And the bear will let you know if it's a defensive encounter because they get really upset.
Yeah.
They do not like it when they get surprised.
They go, holy shit, a person. And just like you went, holy shit, a bear.
Yeah. And when you think about it from the perspective of a black bear or a grizzly bear, these are both species that are going to want to protect their young. Right? Mm-hmm. They're not going to want to have someone stalking them and then all of a sudden be aware of their presence at, 5 meters away. They're going to think that you were trying to stalk them, that you're trying to kill them. Yeah. And so they're constantly on the lookout for these things. And so what happens is when a bear feels defensive, they'll either turn and run, which they do a lot of the time, right? Like think about all the time you spend out in the forest and you often see like black bears and they're like, I'm out of here, right? Like they're gone.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, in some cases, these animals will respond with defensive behavior. And so they'll start huffing, chuffing, making these roaring or guttural sounds. Sometimes they'll start popping their jaw, opening and closing their mouth, making this weird jaw popping sound. Both black bears and grizzly bears can do that. Sometimes they'll start like foaming at the mouth, drooling, and you're like, oh my God, this is like being in a movie. Like
that foaming at the mouth thing is creepy as hell. Like it's like, oh my God, that's a rabid bear.
Exactly. Right? It's terrifying. And so this animal is getting really upset. Sometimes they'll pound their paws in front of you, like to kind of get you to leave. Like, and all of this.
Well,
with
the
their
stomping.
the stomping.
Like going on the hind legs and like stomping down. Yeah.
It's terrible. It's a horrible experience. And of course, you're likely close range when these things happen, right? So you're like going, oh my gosh, I'm 5 meters away and this is happening like literally in front of me.
Yeah.
And it's super scary. So there's this instinct to want to turn and run. And of course, you got to not do that.
Don't do that.
No turning, running.
Maybe that should have been your one-liner. Don't run.
Don't run. Don't run. Don't run, spray.
Yeah.
Don't run, spray.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe we should go with that. I need to work on this.
You need a tagline for your whatever merch you're selling. Yeah.
Absolutely. I need some merch. Wait.
Yeah, merch too. Yeah, there you go. A couple of things to take away.
Something things to work on. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, yep, this bear is defensive, it's showing signs of defense, then I'm going to respond with submission. So a bear that is showing you lots of aggression like this is basically trying to tell you, get out of here. You scared me. I'm a big scary bear. I'm going to protect my food. I'm going to protect my babies. I'm going to protect myself because you startled me. And I want you to think that I'm big and scary and I'm not worth attacking.
Yeah.
And so your response to that should be, yes, I agree. I will leave now. And when I do talks for,
you're like, fair enough. Goodbye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I hear you. I see you. I feel you. Let's go. Like I'm out of here. And so that should be the response. And so, and the reason why we say to do that response of be submissive, start backing away, giving the animal some space is you're wanting to let them know that you don't want to get into a fight, that you don't want to eat their 1-week-old moose, or eat their cute little baby cubs.
Yeah.
And so this physical motion of backing off and giving the animal space lets them know that you're not actually interested in a fight. This is an accident. And accidents happen. I've literally seen bears run into each other, not know either one of them was there and startle each other. And then they start putting this big, oh, I'm a big scary bear. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how's this going to go? And for the most part, what they do is they figure it out. They communicate with body language. They verbalize that they're not happy with each other. And then one of them decides, that guy's way bigger than me and I'm going to back off and leave. And that's the end. That's it, right? They're not all fighting each other every time they run into each other.
Yeah.
And so I always say to people, if you can learn to communicate like a bear, they're going to understand you and they're going to want to get out of the situation, not continue to escalate it. And so
don't turn it into a bar fight, right?
Exactly. Yes. My bar fight scenario. I don't know if I shared my bar fight scenario with you guys.
I'm not sure.
But I kind of like to kind of think of it like, you know that drunk guy in the bar that's like really loud and he's got his beer and he's kind of waving it around.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom and he's right in the way. So you try to sneak by him, but unfortunately you knock his beer out of his hand. Well, his response is not going to be good, right? He's going to start yelling, making himself look big and trying to intimidate you. Your response should not be to yell back and make yourself look big. Like that's how you get decked out.
Yeah.
So basically, bears that are defensive are like a drunk guy in the bar that you just wrecked his beer. So you want to apologize, right? You want to be a good Canadian. You want to start saying, I'm sorry. Backing away, giving him some space, offering to buy him a beer. And that can help to kind of settle things down. And so back to the whole bear scenario, you're backing away, you're talking calmly. Hopefully there's other people with you and you can group up. Because if you can group up, you got to reduce your chance of getting a physical attack here. And this charge, if they do make a charge towards you, it's more likely it's going to just be a false charge and they'll turn and they'll run.
Right.
And remember, majority of the time when bears do charge people, we do find that they don't make contact. So we're very fortunate that way with bears.
That one video you showed in the training was ridiculous, where they were trying to get that grizzly bear to false charge, and it did it like 10 times. And they're like, it's fine. We know it's going to false charge. I'm like, you're insane. Why are you doing this? Yeah, that was a crazy video.
Yeah. Those were Swedish biologists. And I've met a few Swedish biologists, and they're like, the bears are not that dangerous here. And I'm like, what?
They're still bears.
They're still bears.
Yeah.
It's still the same species that lives here too, right? But yeah, different, I don't know. Anyways, that's a whole other topic.
Whole other thing, yeah.
So you're going to group up if you're with other people. You're going to grab your bear spray. I mean, the minute I see a bear, the first thing I do is pull out my bear spray and I pull the safety off because I have no idea what's about to happen. For all I know, it's about to charge me and make contact. So I've got to have it out first. I'm reading the situation. I'm like, okay, it's defensive. The bear's showing lots of signs of stress. I'm going to back away, give it space. If it runs towards me, I'm going to spray it with bear spray. If I don't have bear spray or I don't get it out in time or it doesn't work and it's imminent that this bear is going to attack me, I'm going to drop to the ground and play dead. And this is where where people start to go, whoa, you can't do that with a black bear.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, really? I beg to differ. I have seen cases where bears who are black bears have got defensive and attacked people. And the people that played dead had much less severe injuries and survived. And Janelle Sharhag did her master's research a couple years ago on this topic of non-fatal black bear attacks, looking at cases, trying to figure out what does it look like in the U.S. Like, are the majority of black bears predatory? Are they defensive? Like, what's the situation? And It turned out like 52% of attacks by black bears in the lower 48 are actually defensive. So we can't just say they're all predatory. That's just not going to work. And another piece of information that came out of that study was she when she talked to these survivors, because of course all these people survived, she found that the people that played dead had much less severe injuries. The people that fought back were severely injured. So, that evidence in itself is based off 210 cases. And so, this is great information. And again, it goes back to those myths. We need to help people understand that we have to look at the behavior of the animal and the situation. Right. Why is this animal here? Why is this situation occurring? What can I do to get out of this situation? Not make it worse.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we see movies, the response in the movies is to shoot a gun, to yell, to scream, to fight. And that is not really what you should do in a defensive situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally makes senes. And yeah, it definitely helped me with I remember hearing about black bear is more likely to be predatory. I was like, well, why? Why? Did you ask? Like,
yeah. Anybody talk to them about this? Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, and we certainly do see predatory cases. Like here in Canada and Alaska, we don't have a study on non-fatal attacks, but we do have one on fatal. And of the fatal attacks that we do see in Canada and Alaska by black bears, majority of them are actually predatory. Remember, majority of them are cases where people were obviously they died, right? And there's no one there to kind of really talk about what happened or why it happened too, right? We've got cases in the US right now where we don't know why the person died.
Right.
Like there was a case in Colorado last year where a woman was walking dogs off leash. She got attacked by a black bear and killed. Now, did the bear kill her because it was predatory and saw her as food, or did it attack her because it was defensive because it had cubs and she had 2 dogs off leash that got her upset and defensive and she ended up killing the person? We'll never know.
Yeah.
That information is just not available to us.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to with those cases where people lose their lives because there's not a lot of information to go off of.
Yeah.
But anyways, going back to the lying down playing dead, you're like, this is a horrible option. Yeah. Like I don't want to do that. I've never had to do it. Knock on wood. There's a lot of wood around here. It's great. Yeah. It's very safe. It's good. You lying down and playing dead is a really, really sucky option. I hate it. And yet when we look at the stats, we look at Dr. Stephen Herrero's work out of the University of Calgary, we look at his bear attack book. It's like, yep, it works. It's a very effective way of surviving a defensive bear attack.
Right.
And majority of people who do lie down and play dead do survive those attacks. Why do they survive? There's a few reasons. One is because when bears attack, they tend to go for the face, the head, and the neck. That's a problem.
Vitals, yeah.
Those are vitals.
Things you need.
These are vital things we need. So by protecting ourselves, by covering up our neck, putting our bodies like face down on the ground, you're covering up your neck, you're covering up your carotid artery, you're covering your face where you need to breathe. You're
leave
helping.
Your backpack on.
Yeah. And leave your backpack on. If you've got a helmet on, leave it on. Equipment that you can cover yourself up with. All of this really helps to result in people not end up dying, right? So they don't end up with a fatal injury. And the other piece to that is once the bear perceives you as dead and you're lying there not making noise, not moving, they're going to go, oh, it's dead. Don't have to do anything else. Okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And they, they round up their cubs or themselves, or maybe they had a carcass, but they're too upset right now, so they're just going to leave the area. They're going to go. They're going to get out of there. And you've removed the threat by playing dead. So there's no reason for the bear to continue attacking you.
Right.
Now, in rare cases, we have people that lie down, play dead, and then they're like, well, the bear attack just kept going. It was over 2 minutes. I felt as though the bear was eating my body. That is not a defensive bear attack. You made a mistake. Yeah. And it happens, right? Like sometimes things happen really quickly and you're like, I don't know what the situation is. I'm going to lie down and play dead. And then they find out that in fact it was a bear that was stalking them and unfortunately is predatory. And in that case where you feel as though your attack is prolonged, that you feel as though the bear is actually feeding on your body, you are going to fight back. So if you didn't get out your bear spray, you're going to get it out now. If you have a knife, if you've got a branch, if there's a rock, if there's anything you can do to protect yourself, you're going to start hitting the bear in the nose, stabbing them in the eyes, because that is the moneymaker. Their olfactory nervous system is 20 times the size of a human's, and it is painful for them to get hit there. So, and they're not used to it. Deer do not do that. Deer do not just start, bam, I'm just going to punch you in the face. They don't do that, right? So that's going to really dissuade a bear from wanting to continue fighting you because you are now no longer easy prey.
That just made me think about a kangaroo fighting a bear. Now I want to see that, but I don't want to see that because that's cruel. But
there's probably something on YouTube where they've made like a robot version.
I'm sure there's a mock-up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I go to physio, there's this ongoing fight between, do you think a grizzly bear or a gorilla would win in a fight? Right. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Never ending.
Never ending. Every time I show up, one of the therapists is like, yeah, I got a new list here. This is why a gorilla can win. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, sure. Agreed. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Can I get my physio?
Yeah, no kidding. It's awesome.
So that's defensive.
Right.
I guess we better talk about predatory.
Right.
This stuff is pretty rare. Statistically, it is more rare for grizzlies, for sure. In the last 15 years, 95% of grizzly bear attacks across the world have been defensive. 5% of them are predatory. And so I want to be really clear on that yes, we are doing a behavioral-based approach, but there are some things that can also kind of lead us to understand that it's more likely that you'll have a grizzly bear to be defensive with you than you'll be predatory. Mm-hmm. That being said, I have seen cases. I've been in an encounter where I was with a grizzly that was predatory that tried to eat me. So it can happen. And we just had a case in 2019 of a man on Quadra Island in British Columbia. He was partially eaten by a grizzly bear before he was able to stab it in the neck, and actually he struck it in an area where it actually hit the carotid artery and it started to bleed out. It was very lucky money shot.
No kidding.
Yeah, very rare that I could. Anyways, he survived. The bear died. And we had a case, I think the year before that, where a woman in the Yukon and her baby were killed by a predatory grizzly bear that had got into a fight with a porcupine a few months before that. So it was in really bad shape. It was malnourished. So bears have all different reasons as to why they're predatory. Sometimes they're food conditions. Sometimes they are, they just don't know what we are. They misidentify as our species. And sometimes they're just like, you know what? I'm an opportunistic carnivore and this opportunity knocked. You're by yourself.
Give it a shot.
Just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Well, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I want to be really clear that these types of attacks are rare. But in fields of work where people do work by themselves or in groups of two, you're bent over a lot, working in a habitat where these animals are expecting to see prey species, you are ripe for the picking if you're acting like a prey species, which people are, right?
Yeah.
You're bent over planting a tree. Yeah, I definitely a bear or a cougar walk by and go, ooh, it's a deer, right?
Let's just take it out.
Yeah.
It's just there. It's not doing anything.
Yeah. It's like, I might as well eat it. Yeah. And so the behavior of a bear that is predatory is very, very different. This animal, you're likely not to become aware of it until it's pretty close to you. And, or you'll be working in an area and you'll see a bear come into the area that you're working. You're like, oh, what's it doing? And then it starts to slowly approach you and you're like, hey, what are you doing, buddy?
Yeah.
And it can be, you can kind of perceive it as the animal's being curious. They're kind of slowly moving
the
towards you.
Thing, right?
Oh yeah. The circling thing's the worst.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'll walk directly towards you very confidently. Sometimes they'll put their ears back. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll do this kind of zigzag pattern where they just kind of like look like they're curious and they slowly get closer and closer.
Right.
And then eventually at some point they will make a run at you. Other times I've heard folks say that they saw the bear in front of them and then it went to the bush. Like, oh, it's gone. Great. And then it came up from behind, or like circled behind them, or came out from the side, started to walk next to them in the bush. They're like, oh God, what's going on here?
Right.
So this bear isn't foaming at the mouth. This bear isn't huffing and chuffing and doing all these noises. So they don't want to warn you. They want to sneak up on you. So it's very, very opposite behavior.
Hunting you, yeah.
They're hunting you.
Yeah.
So should you lie down and play dead? No.
Don't make it easy for them.
Don't make it easy for them. Should you turn and run? No, because then you're going to give them an advantage, right?
You're
because
acting like prey again.
You're acting
Stop
like
acting
prey.
like prey. Yeah.
They're going to be able to knock you down easily from behind. Now you can't kick and you can't use your arms to punch, and they can literally jump on your back and break your neck. So running is not a great option. I don't think people really think about that. They don't think about the repercussions of what happens when you do that, because that's literally what's going to happen.
Right.
And so it's better to have these appendages out here so that you can use them to your advantage, because they're not used to seeing that, right? Like deer do not stand up on their back legs and go like, poo poo, let's check out this. I got karate moves, right? So you really,
that's what I do in the bush all the time.
Right? Okay.
Just dropping crane kicks and
Oh man. Don't even get me started. There's this one guy in BC who literally thought because he had a black belt in karate that he could just karate chop a bear. It did not work out.
Oh my goodness.
He survived though, but he learned very quickly that lying down and playing dead was a better option. But yeah, he tried to fight the bear. So they'll just maul you if you do that. That's not a great idea. And so in this case, when you're like, yep, this bear is definitely intent and interested in me, whether it's perceiving me as prey or it thinks I have food and it wants to get access to it, I cannot let this happen. So I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to pull up my bear spray. I'm going to group up if there's other people with me, and I'm going to act like the bigger, scarier bear. You're going to bluff this animal is what you're going to do. You're going to bluff them into thinking that you are not worth attacking, that you are big and scary. And I'm 5'3.5". I know you guys can't see me, but I'm a little person. And I have taken on a 400-pound grizzly before who wanted to eat me.
Right.
And I convinced him. I think I convinced him I was crazy.
You don't look very scarred up or anything. So
I'm not
you must
all scarred up. So
yeah.
I made it out of there. And I actually didn't even spray with bear spray, which is amazing. But he circled around me. And, it is a really scary situation to be in. But believe it or not, like, you can dissuade them. You can, jut towards them like, hey, get out of here. Let them know that you're a human. Let them know that you're going to fight if that's what it's going to come down to, and prepare yourself to fight. So get out your bear spray. If you don't have bear spray, grab a branch, grab a rock. If you have an air horn, you can use noise deterrents for sure. Yeah. Whether or not they'll work, hard to say. If that bear has been exposed to a lot of hazing noisemakers, it may not respond to that. So it kind of depends on where you are too. Like more of the front country environments where bears experience a lot of hazing from officers, they may not respond to that. And same thing with industrial sites where they overhaze bears. And it's a very unfortunate situation where you end up with these bears that are completely conditioned to sound, and they're like, yep, don't care.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Go ahead, use your air horn again. It means nothing to me. Yeah.
I was fortunate enough that I accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, but I somehow, I used to work in the Swan Hills, which is Black Bear City, right? Yeah. And it was like around them all the time. And I just kind of happened to, I think, do the right thing all the time, because they're always doing the circling thing or do the zigzagging thing. And I just started swearing and throwing rocks and that kind of stuff. And it always worked. But I was also just happened to work. I was very lucky in that I didn't do the wrong thing, right? So it was absolutely. But yeah, I was happy to hear that I did the right thing by accident.
Totally. It's great. Their instinct kicked in and you did the right thing. Unfortunately, for some people, it's the opposite, right? Where they just are like, I want to back away. I want to get out of here. Yeah. And when they do that, then the bear gets more confident, right? They're going to become more attuned to okay, yeah, this is prey. I'm going to give it a try. They're afraid of me. You don't want to show that fear. You want to stand your ground. And that's the hardest thing to ask a person to stand their ground. Because it's a very, very, very difficult thing to do. And of course, the first thing people are going to do is take out their phone, right? So,
put your phone first.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think I showed you guys a video where these guys, I was like, why didn't they call 911? It just.
Oh yeah. They're right next to the highway or whatever.
They literally could have called.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. But anyways.
That's the ego thing again, right?
That's just
thing. I don't want to be embarrassed myself by Yeah.
Yeah, it's strange. Someone needs to do a study. And so, yeah, use your bear spray. It is an effective tool. You may have to spray multiple times. I have seen cases where people had to go through an entire can before.
Oh, yeah.
And we teach in the bear spray course, we spend like an hour on bear spray because there's so much awesome research on it right now and new stuff that's come out. We talk about things like, does it expire? And can you spray it in the wind? Can you spray it in the cold? Storage and of course carrying it around where you're going. And then of course we also want people to learn how to actually physically use it. You wouldn't believe how many videos people send me and they're just like standing there like, oh, how do I take this?
You don't have that time.
I don't have that kind of time. So I would highly recommend getting a can of the training bear spray and using it and learning how to use it and then practice pulling out your bear spray. So if you do have an encounter, you're like you're just ready. You wouldn't believe the number of dogs I've almost sprayed in the face with bear spray now because of this. Because I literally am just so fast.
Billy the Kid of bear spray. Yeah. We really considered you had to send in a video of us using the fake bear spray. I happen to have a wolf pellet in my office. I really considered wearing it so that I could act like the bear. I'm glad I didn't, but it would have been funny. I feel like you would have enjoyed it.
I would have. You wouldn't believe some of the videos that I get sent. Some of them put it to music. It's insane. Some of the people, they get their kids to make like a giant bear statue thing and then they spray it and it's fun. Everyone gets involved. It's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess so basically let's break it down. So let's summarize those two things. Sure. Let's make it real quick and simple. Summarize defensive bear versus predatory bear.
So defensive bear encounter, the bear has cubs, it has a food source, or you surprised it at close range. It will show signs of aggression, huffing, puffing, foaming at the mouth, drooling, jaw popping, slapping the ground. It may make a charge, whether it's false or real. And your reaction to that is get out your bear spray, get ready to spray, don't run, group up if you're with other people, and be submissive. If the bear isn't coming towards you, you're going to back away, give the animal some space, letting them know you're not calmly, no yelling, no screaming and making yourself look big. You're just trying to look submissive, back off, let the animal know you don't want to fight. And if they do come towards you, you're going to spray them with bear spray. If you don't have bear spray, you're going to drop to the ground and play dead until the bear stops attacking you and hopefully leaves the area.
Right.
The other one, of course, is the very opposite. With a non-defensive bear, this bear is interested and intent on you. They're going to be quiet. They're going to be trying to sneak up on you. If you believe this bear is interested and intent on you, you're going to stand your ground, make yourself look big, grab your bear spray, get ready to spray, yelling, screaming, shouting. If there's other people, like I said, make sure everyone's close together, making yourself look big, throw rocks, throw sticks. You can use an air horn. And if it comes towards you, spray it with bear spray.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, you're going to fight back with everything you have.
Right.
Punching at the nose, stabbing at the eyes.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. So I want to finish it off with the specifics around the guns versus spray. I mean, there's all these deterrents, right? There's the bear bangers, the bear bells, spray, and guns. Yeah. Right. Let's walk through a little bit. Yeah. So basically I didn't hear you talk about bells or bangers at all. So I'm assuming that you should just not do those.
Yeah, definitely. Let's start with the bells. Useless. Who invented them anyways? I
think the idea was noise, right?
Yeah, I guess it's just a noisemaker. They're we'll just have this easy little noisemaker attached to us. But what we didn't think about was I don't know, maybe just doing a study to find out if it means anything to a bear. Right. And turns out it means nothing.
Dinner bell.
Yeah. Tom Smith, Dr. Tom Smith out of Brigham Young literally did a study on this, and he found that every bear that walked by and, they had no reaction to the sound of the bells. So we do not recommend bells. We recommend the human voice. And then when it comes to bear bangers, and flares and whistlers, there's a little bit of an issue there with, of course, forest fires, grass fires, training, knowing when to use them. And I know a lot of people carry bear bangers in the bush. And when I ask them, so when would you use a bear banger? And they're like, well, if I ran into a bear. I'm like, well, what if that bear had cubs and it was defensive and it was showing lots of signs of stress? Do you think shooting off a bear banger would make the situation better or worse? Have you thought about that? Right. And they're like, well, I don't know. Actually, I don't even know what I would do if I ran into a bear. Like, so it's just like they think that having these deterrents or a gun is what their options are, and that
buy
you just
the gear and you'll be okay. It's like, no.
Buy the gear. You're cool, man. It's all good.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what they found in the research is that these loud noisemakers like guns or bear bangers, if used in defensive encounter, can actually elicit an attack and has a much higher chance of you getting attacked.
You're going to make it worse.
You're going to make it worse, not better.
Yeah.
You've got to be the kind Canadian. You got to say, I'm sorry. You got to back away, not start yelling, screaming, and shooting off things to scare the animal more. Also, a bear banger can go off behind the bear. If it does that, now you have a bear who's very upset, also coming straight at you because they're like, "Oh God, there's something behind me now!" Like you're just going to get mowed down. So it's not a great plan. And then when it comes to guns, they did some research in Alaska, and they looked at cases from like 1883 onwards up until I don't have the stats on me right now.
That's okay. Yeah.
But needless to say, they looked at literally hundreds of cases.
Sure.
And certainly there were lots of cases where people shot and killed the bear, but there was also a lot of cases where people died. They were severely mauled and killed on site. And a lot of cases where people missed the bear, never got the gun out in time, shot themselves in the leg, shot this person they were with. And that's why I always say to people, like, it's so important to think about, like, what is my best tool in this situation? And I think your best tool is always going to be bear spray. Like it's something we can all carry. We can't all carry guns in national parks and provincial parks. Like that's crazy. Yeah. And we certainly can't carry them at work.
Well, in the States, you probably can do that stuff, but
absolutely. Yeah. And that's definitely more commonplace and also legal. Whereas it's not here. And so I'm just trying to think of if we gave like guns to tourists, how that would go if they were in Jasper. Like,
here, this is your deterrent for grizzly bears.
Yeah.
Don't shoot it downtown.
Yeah. There would be a nightmare. You'd hear like someone would hear a sound in the bush and they'd shoot at it and be some poor camper that's like going for a pee, right? Like it just wouldn't go very well.
Well, and I think there's like, there was something else you said too, as well. There was something else you said along the lines of shooting. You said it took an average of like 4 shots to get a bear to stop charging or whatever it was.
It did. It took an average of 4 shots to stop the attack.
Right.
And it's just, you just can't get that kill shot very often on the first shot. I mean, some people do, and but a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what we're seeing in the stats when we look at these cases of people getting killed. Like sometimes they do have a gun with them and we're like, well, they had a gun, but they're still dead.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like these close range encounters where people had a firearm, whether they had a firearm or not on them, it didn't make a difference. They still died.
It was irrelevant.
It was completely irrelevant. And it's just, I think it also is this whole concept that it's like, oh, I have a gun, I'm going to be fine, right?
A gun's better than a bear spray. Yeah.
I don't have to make noise. I got a gun. If I run into a bear and it comes at me, I'll just shoot it.
Yep.
But they don't think out the whole scenario of the fact is if they're not making noise, if they're not being aware of their surroundings, they're likely going to run into a bear at close range. And that bear, if it charges at them, they're not going to have a kill shot. They're not going to have an opportunity to get the safety off and stop the attack. So it's got to end. The ego's got to get thrown out the window and we got to get real.
Or the training to even be able to deal with that situation. Like I'm sure there's lots of people that have like tactical training, right? Like I went out and I shoot my gun every week and I know how to use it. Like, but do you know how to do it when there's like a monster running at you? Probably not. Like you're probably not going to react the way you did in the controlled setting in a, with a lane, and I shoot this way and I put the gun down and there's a bell. It's like, no, this is real life. This is a bear. Yeah. Like it always seemed, I was never really sure where I sat with that. Right. Cause like often I'm a hunter. So like often when hunting, I never carried bear spray or anything. Yeah. And then, not until I started bow hunting, just cause that's not going to work. But now I do carry it with me, right? I always have it on my backpack and stuff, but you definitely convinced me of, you talked about it for a lot longer than this. But like, I think one thing also that really convinced me was the, how would you say it? I guess the spread of the deterrent. So like a gun, a bullet's like whatever, a centimeter or an inch maybe. Whereas the bear spray it's a big swath the size of a person. Like you've got this massive fan shape in front of you that goes like long distance and creates this big cloud where you're gonna hit the bear. Yeah. Whereas you may not hit the bear and you may only have one shot, and then that one shot misses or maims them.
good luck. Now we're talking about the revenant right there.
Now,
right?
now we got a pissed off injured bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to get a lot worse for you. And I've seen cases where people have thought they could use a gun and it's been the saddest results. Like there was a case in the Yukon a few years ago where a grizzly bear broke into a cabin. The husband and wife managed to get outside. The wife was being mauled by the bear. Husband went back inside, grabbed a shotgun, came back out, shot the bear multiple times, stopped the attack. The bear ran off, died from its injuries. He went to go do first aid on his wife, called for help. She unfortunately did succumb. And when they did the autopsy, they had to tell him, your wife was not killed by a bear. She was killed by gunshot wounds.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Don't
So
like that.
let's get real here about what we're
Yeah.
capable of as people.
Mhm.
And stress inoculation, it definitely occurs in the military and law enforcement.
Mhm.
They do it. But I even know like staff in the government, that's part of their training because they work with bears.
Mhm.
And they've told me cases where they've jumped off a helicopter and they were about to go walk up to a bear that they had, they were going to collar, that they had tranked, thought that it was asleep, wasn't, all of a sudden comes rushing at them
Mhm.
and literally went to go grab their gun and didn't get out in time, and it ran at their techie, and their tech literally was like, and like
Yeah.
just literally, luckily the bear bluffed
Mhm.
and then turned and ran, and then of course fell asleep because he was tranquilized. But it was like, holy cow, man.
Yeah.
We're trained for this. We had guns on us and we still,
Mhm.
we weren't prepared for what was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's it's like that misconception of like, well, if I run into a bear, the best case scenario is I kill the bear. It's like, no, the best case scenario is that you stop the bear from coming at you. Right.
Mhm.
And you explained the effect that bear spray has. Like if you get them full in the face, like they're not going to be able to see, they're not going to be able to like do anything. They're going to be,
Yeah.
they're
They're incapacitated.
They're totally incapacitated.
Yeah.
You don't need to kill it in order to like, and you're probably not going to kill it if you try to, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah. And I think the stats really points that out, right? Like,
They do. And
versus
like it's amazing. And it really is a tool of conservation, because not only does it mean that we don't have to lie down and play dead in a defensive attack or fight back in a predatory one, we're now going to walk away with no injuries or little injuries, if anything.
Yeah.
And the bear gets to survive too, because let's face it, most of the cases that people get attacked by bears, they're usually doing something they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And
it's
and
the
that
people's
got them in
fault,
trouble.
probably not the bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the most case, not
Yeah.
always, right?
Right.
But it's like, if we just prepare ourselves better in the outdoors and we have bear spray, if everything goes wrong and you've been doing everything possible to do right, you still run into that bear, at least you have this option that anyone can use.
Right.
Even a kid can use a
I
can
think
of
that's
bear spray.
yeah, right. It's easy to use.
Yeah.
Like you just do it. It's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the great thing. Like, I'm not going to throw a gun over the shoulder of my 12-year-old and say, go to the playground.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I probably would give her a can of bear spray.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's just, it's accessible, and it's just, and if you're already in a situation where the person's being mauled, good luck trying to shoot the bear while it's mauling someone.
Yeah.
Like,
Evident by
holy
the story
cow.
you told, right? Yeah.
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 It's just not.
At least if you
happen.
spray them with bear spray, the
Yeah.
person's going to have some hurt sinuses, but the bear's
Yeah.
going to not be able to continue attacking and they're going to
Exactly.
leave.
Yeah. And the way that it works on the bear is it gets into the mucous membranes, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and then the lungs, and then the skin. And so it's an inflammatory agent, so it causes extreme inflammation. It causes involuntary eye closure. They can't see you. They swell right up and close. So how are they going to attack something they can't see?
Yeah.
They can't.
Yeah.
They're coughing, gagging, burning sensation. So they're having a really difficult time breathing, and they're in extreme pain. They've got like, it's just horrible for them. So what they'll do is they'll turn and they'll run. They'll try to get away from what this horrible thing is that's putting hot sauce in their face, right? They're going to want to get away from you. It's self-preservation time. Or they'll drop to the ground and start trying to rub it off, or they'll just look really stunned and slowly move away.
Right.
And this gives you an opportunity to back away while keeping out your bear spray. And if they do re-engage, which sometimes they do, you're ready to hit them again with that bear spray.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I think that covers my specific questions about it. I think we did a good job of putting it all together. Hour and 14 minutes.
Wow. That's awesome.
So, is there anything you want to finish off with? Like maybe you got a crazy bear story, or what I wrote down here before was that, I wanted two situations. The most scared you've ever been in a bear situation, and the most
Oh,
you've
the
ever
cutest?
been. Yeah.
Oh, God.
But you can tell whatever you want. If there's something you want to finish with, it's up to you.
One of the scariest ones. It's funny. You'd think the predatory grizzly bear encounter was the scariest. And it truly was. I really did think I was going to die that day.
Right.
But I think one of the ones that's just a good reminder of how important it is to be proactive is my family came to visit me. It was one of the first times they'd come out from, out to the mountains to visit me when I moved there. And I made them all put bear spray on and they were really mad at me.
No one else has it. Yeah.
No one else is carrying it. We look stupid.
Yeah.
And, we went for a hike on this trail, called Cougar Creek in Canmore. So I'm like, it's named after a carnivore. You think maybe that might be, relevant.
Yeah.
And there's tons of cars in the parking lot and, it's not somewhere where I would think I'd run into a bear. I've never seen bear sign there all the years that I've lived in that area. But it was just practice, right? It was just like, I've got to model the right behavior. I want my family to be safe. And so there's a big group of us. We're all together walking down the trail. They're pouting because they think they look stupid with all the bear spray on. And I've got my dog with me who's on a leash because he was, I used to have this lab and he was an idiot. So like, there's no way you could let him just do what he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're walking down the trail and like the water is not that high yet. So we're trying to hop and skip over little rocks and there's tons of willows and it's pretty thick, right?
Right.
And we're making noise and we're going up the trail and literally I walk right into a grizzly bear.
Ish.
And she's got 2 cubs and my dog lunges and he gets pretty close. Like he's like 5 feet from her face. And I'm just like,
Jeez.
Oh Jesus, right? Like this is not going to go well.
Right.
And she saw that obviously my dog was on leash. So my dog couldn't attack her dog and I would attack her cubs. So I was able to pull him in. So there we go. Threats removed that way. I'm with my family. So there's a big group of us. I instantly pull out my bear spray with the other hand and she takes one look at us and she is gone. She just runs in the opposite direction. Now I think about that situation sometimes because I'm like, if I had been by myself that day, if I had had my dog off leash that day, if I'd forgot my bear spray that day, this whole thing would have looked completely different.
Totally. Yeah.
And if I hadn't kept my family together, if my family had spread out on the trail, what if my mom had been the first person my mom would not have made it. She would have turned and ran. She would have been like, like she wouldn't even thought to get out the bear spray. So you got to think about the people you're with, your colleagues, your family. Like, don't you want the best for them? Don't you want them to be safe when you're out there?
Yeah.
We all do, right? So do the right thing.
Yeah. Put your ego aside. Take care of the risks. Yeah.
Yeah. Reduce the risk. Don't take the chance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That was awesome. I think we covered it. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Please rate and review. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. Just rate and review. Go on Spotify or Apple or wherever you are. Rate and review it. Share it with a friend. That helped me out a lot. I hope you learned a bunch. Share this with your friends and family. If you're going to be going out for a hike in the bush, you're going to be camping, you're going to be doing whatever, make sure your family knows what's going on. We want to stay safe out there, right? And with this new information that you just received, you've got all the tools that you need. Besides bear spray. Get bear spray. Awesome. Well, have a good one. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.